I'm here today with Joy Burnford, who is the founder and CEO of Encompass Equality and is a recognised trailblazer in gender equality. She's interviewed hundreds of the world's business leaders, published more than 70 articles on Forbes.com, is an influential speaker and host of the Confident Conversation podcast, and she's the author of Don't Fix Women, The Practical Path to Gender Equality at Work. So first of all, welcome, Joy. It's lovely to have you here.
Hello, Alison. It's amazing to be here. Thank you.
It's a very special day, isn't it? Because I think literally about half an hour before we started talking. Tell us what happened, Joy.
My book arrived, my first copies of my book. So it's very, very exciting to actually be physically holding this amazing book. It's such a special moment, it really is. And yes, it's my wedding anniversary as well. So it all happened on the same day, which is lovely. Yeah, feeling really, really
It's a
proud.
really special moment, isn't it? If you're watching this on YouTube, by the way, you'll have seen Joy just waving her book around there. It's absolutely beautiful. And I think we're both really pleased with that cover, aren't we? Which is...
Oh, and that cover was...
It took a while to get there.
At the time, it was a while to get there. And I think because I changed my... the whole premise of the book halfway through writing. So we changed from one metaphor to another. And so we had to redo the cover. And I was a bit frustrated by that. But we got there and they've done a fantastic job with that.
Yeah, you can see it behind. I mean, you saw the big one in Joy's hand there, but I'm pointing up to the one on my shelf as well. Yeah. It stands out well on in a sort of small format as well. Up there. Brilliant. Yeah. So, well, I mean, we talked a little bit about the cover, a little bit about the book arriving, which is, hugely exciting. But tell us a little bit about the title, the Don't Fix Women. Where did that come from?
Yeah. So I think it's a massive, massive challenge for organisations to have equal men and women, and equal, just keeping hold of women, retaining women in particular in organisations is really, really tough and challenging. And it's not easy for anybody to fix. I think the biggest challenge we've got is that organisations were built by men for men, and a lot of the time these are, business leaders are male, and I guess what's happened in the past is they've been sort of grappling with, what can we do? And we've tried lots of different things, and nothing seems to be working. Various attempts. I mean, I actually started my business looking at confidence and women's confidence in particular. And over the years, I've really realized that actually you can have the most confident woman, but if you don't have a system and a structure and an organization in place to support that confidence, you might as well just be, banging your head against a brick wall and the women still leave. And books like Lean In and Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, and those sorts of things, which there is an element of that which is really important, but actually what's stopping women is all these other things, as I call it, sort of perfect storm of challenges that women can face in organizations that are not necessarily well understood by those who are in senior roles, who are either male or they are women who've perhaps been through a tough journey themselves and don't necessarily understand the challenges that women have. And it's often easier for women just to leave because they can't cope with this perfect storm of challenges. So it's really, the book is actually understanding and going into the fundamentals of what those obstacles are and then how organizations can change to support those women.
And you're right, aren't you, that there is a role, obviously, for confidence building in women, for interventions that support women and so on. Yeah. But it is quite easy for that to tip over almost into victim blaming, and not to sort of see the more systematic issue.
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
No, go on.
No. You can.
Well, I was going to say, when you say women here, we're not. It's not an unproblematic word these days. So, what exactly do you mean?
And absolutely, and I think. Thank you for asking the question, Alison, because there are over 50 different genders identified, and the book can't possibly go into every single different gender. So the book really talks about men and women and those that identify as a woman. But it really is, if you do what I'm recommending in the book, it will create a better workplace for everyone, especially those in a minority. But it's really some of the key things in the book are talking about personalization and really understanding your individuals that you have working for you. So there are various things like that which helps to, if you embrace that, it will create a better place, not for women, not for men, for everybody. Yeah. So it will be creating better workplaces where everybody can be happy and thrive and be more productive at the end of the day.
Well, I was just about to say to you, before we start to talk about the how, let's talk about the why. Let's start with why. But you kind of do, why does this matter so much? Because I know a lot of businesses are so doubled down on just surviving, just getting through at the moment. So why is it so important that they dedicate time and resource to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important, I think, firstly, to have diverse thinking at the top of organizations. Most organizations have customers and clients that are a mixed gender, and you need to actually understand those challenges of your clients. And I know a number of organizations now, big organizations, are saying they're not going to employ a supplier if they don't have a good balanced leadership team. And yeah, I mean, I think it was either Amazon or Facebook or something like that I heard of recently who was saying, some quite strong things about not having, or if the organization wasn't owned or had some representation by women. So, yeah, and clients, so for example, lawyers, consulting firms, that sort of thing, I'm hearing more and more that clients are wanting people on their delivery team that are women. And if they're not, this is going to be the thing that's going to get people really sitting up and changing. But there's also the great resignation. People are leaving organizations at the moment a lot, and there's a massive war for talent still. So, you can increase your talent pool no end if you can be an attractive place for women to work as well, if you can get those numbers up. And my book focuses particularly on retention of women. So it's obviously important to attract women into organizations, but it's about how you keep those women, because there's a bit of a cliff. Women go through, and that's kind of the cover of the book is, you go up this cliff, and women tend to fall off halfway through. And that's because they get, and actually, Denise Wilson, who wrote the foreword for my book, who's the chair of the FTSE Business Women's Leaders Review, she talks about women having rocks in their rucksack and carrying this rucksack up the mountain. And, women can take the rocks out themselves, but actually it's much better if organizations can help look at how you can, take those rocks out for them, leave sort of resting places on the side of the mountain, that they can sit and pause, look at the view for a bit, and then get back on the mountain and carry on the path upwards, because otherwise they're just falling off and you've lost them. And actually the cost to recruit somebody else is, enormous. So it's really, really important.
It's such a great metaphor, isn't it? If you're looking at the cover, it makes all kinds of sense as well. And so that's why I'm convinced. How? And I know that you can't do justice to the entire book in the next few minutes, but just give us maybe one key strategy that you identify from your research that men, particularly male leaders of organizations, can perhaps think about.
Yeah, well, I think it really is about starting from the top and inclusive leadership. And through all my interviews with CEOs and business leaders, I came up with a framework called PACE, which stands for passion, accountability, curiosity, and empathy. And the main thing is about, I call it pick up the pace, because this came from an interview with David Schwimmer, who's the CEO of the London Stock Exchange. And he was telling me a story about, he was giving a presentation to a group of individuals. And one woman put her hand up and said, what are you doing around gender equality? And he said, we're doing this, that, and the other, but it's going to take time. And the look on this woman's face was like, what do you mean it's going to take time? Why is it going to take time? And from that point onwards, he said, we've just got to start. And that's the main message of my book, which is actually, you've got to start today. And the book has many, many, many practical actions in it that you can pick up today and get started, because there's no point starting tomorrow. And there's that lovely Chinese proverb, which the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Second best time is now. So it's really, really important to just get on with it. There's no reason to delay, and just start small. You don't have to change massive things. The second part of the book does go on to cultural frameworks and the importance of having a culture, an organization that has 3 cultural frameworks, I believe, for a good gender balanced business, before you even get on to looking at the obstacles that women face. Because if you have things like flexibility, allyship, and a coaching culture, if you have those 3 things in place, dealing with those obstacles makes it so much easier. You don't have to go down to the granular level of how do I fix menopause in the workplace, or how do I, support a woman with miscarriage, because you've got those coaching conversations already happening, and you've got the flexible working, and you have the allyship, so you understand how to be a great ally to those in a minority.
It is really exciting to think, in a sense, these are not trivial things, but they're not rocket science. You can make a massive difference in your organization tomorrow with some of these techniques, can't you?
Yeah, and I think COVID has actually been a real blessing on that first one, flexibility. I think one thing on this we need to be careful of is not going into a 2-tier workforce, so that we go back to the ways that we used to do things. Because, you might end up having women who might choose to work at home flexibly, and for argument's sake, the men go back into the office, and that's where decisions are made. So you've got to be, if you're a leader, you've got to be really careful that if you're having hybrid meetings, you have perhaps everybody sitting with a screen on their table, so you don't feel like it's them and us, and keeping that sense of remembering how it was like during COVID lockdowns, and making sure that flexibility works and continues to work.
Yes, if it did nothing else, it showed us that the things we thought had to be in place don't necessarily, that we can adapt much more quickly than we thought.
Exactly. and we had this mandate to go and work from home. Whereas people have been asking it for years and they were like, oh, it's too difficult, can't do it. So now I'm like, well, just, you don't need to wait for another COVID crisis to make some of these other things change. Just do it and lead from the top. It's got to be led from the top. Really has.
Brilliant. And I want to talk to you as well about writing, Joy, because I know that this, well, just how did you feel about the whole kind of, writing a book idea?
Oh, I really wanted to write a book, but I had absolutely no idea how I was going to do it. I was petrified and I really didn't think I could do it. And I just kept thinking, well, why would anybody, what would I write? How could I write it? And all these things. So I had all these imposter syndrome gremlins going on in my head. But I've been totally surprised by the process and how it's made me feel, how it's developed me as a person, the growth. I've pushed myself out of my comfort zone a lot. And I feel like I've grown professionally just so much in the last 2 years. It's been incredible. So, it's been things like just having the time for deep thinking, because I'm a bit of a flitter and I kind of manage lots of different projects, and I'm always moving, juggling lots of balls, and I never have time to sit down and think. I think with the age of technology and always got my phone on and everything else. And for me to actually force myself to sit down and do some deep thinking was immense. And I now know I can do it without having to force myself to do it. I would never have done that. And I've developed things like some new, frameworks, models, learned through you about visual representation of, thoughts, which has been phenomenal, actually. And that's now, forming the basis of a lot of what I do in the business. Exploratory writing has been a really fascinating tool that you've taught me, and things like just metaphors and use of metaphors and things I haven't thought about since I was at school donkeys years ago. So actually it was just, bringing back all these things. It's like, oh yes, and actually I can write and I can do this. So it's been really, really enjoyable. Really enjoyable.
Well, there's
process.
about 20 things I want to pick up on there and explore. I'm trying to work out which order to do it. First of all, let's just talk about the irony of somebody who is an expert in women's confidence feeling like an imposter and writing a book.
I feel like that all the time.
But isn't that interesting?
Which is, but that's why I set my business up originally, because I've lacked confidence myself. So I can seem quite confident, like when I'm talking now. I've done a lot of preparation for this and any other talks I do and other things. I've now learned the skills and techniques that you can employ to get over that. I didn't think I could before, and that's one of the reasons why I'm just going to switch my pinging off. Sorry. One of the reasons that I set this business up in the first place, because I thought, actually, if you can learn it, and I didn't know you could learn confidence, and actually you can.
And
so
I think that's
and
really
it's working
important.
out the process and the tools.
Yeah, for anybody listening who's going, well, of course, Joy is an expert in confidence and she's a very confident person, so of course she can write a book.
Yeah, I'm not.
No. And here she is, having written her book, and so that's really helpful.
And from all those early conversations we had, I was like, oh, I can't do this. And I had to have regular calls with you to say, can I really do this? Is this okay?
It's so interesting because from the outside, it's like, you're not only can you do it, you are doing it. You look, so it's But you're right as well about, and let's come on to exploratory writing just for a second. So I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think that if you aren't confident in your writing, this is a great way of getting started, isn't it? Because it takes all the pressure off. You're not performing, you're just exploring, and you're just going, well, what do I think about this? And if I were to write a book about this, what might I talk about?
Yeah. And I use it. I used it this morning. I kind of have my thing now. If I need to do deep thinking, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. As you know, this is about the only time of day I have any time without kids and dogs and everything else, vying for my attention. So 5 o'clock in the morning is my kind of writing time if I need to do deep thinking. It doesn't happen every week, but if I do that. And this morning I got up at 5 and I did some exploratory writing preparing for this podcast. I thought, well, it just seemed right to do that. And it's just, if you don't quite know where to start, you just set the timer for 6 minutes and just scribble. And it just gets things flowing. It's really, really clever.
It's just so ridiculously simple, but it is so powerful, isn't it? And I think, once you know you've got that in your back pocket, it gives you an enormous amount of confidence, because you can always kind of write yourself out of any hole that you're in and come up
not
with
just
something.
writing a book. I think that's the thing. It's not just for writing a book. It's for preparing a presentation. It's for going to an interview. It's doing anything.
It's for having a difficult conversation with your partner.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All these things. Brilliant.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you mentioned was the metaphor. And this I thought was really crucial for you, because we had that kind of almost mechanical metaphor for the fixing initially. Yeah. And then you said, it's not right. It's not right. It's about climbing a mountain, and it's about making
Mm,
the way, fixing the way, because
mm,
that they're
mm,
on equal tracks at the moment. So, yeah, let's just explore a little bit why that mattered so much to get the metaphor and how that drove the writing.
mm. And it's really interesting because I mean, as you say, we started with the kind of the ladder analogy and climbing up the ladder and then using tools and hammers and chisels and things to fix it. And I very quickly realised that when you think about work nowadays, it's not about that upwards trajectory. You know, actually, there's a lot, and it's been used quite a lot as well, the ladder analogy. But I think it's really helped me actually more than anything to picture that mountain as I was writing, and just thinking about how the different elements I was talking about could be applied to that sort of mountain analogy. And I think it helped, Denise Wilson's point about the rucksack, and all these little things just kind of added to it. And I actually remember I was sitting in the garden with a friend of mine who's in a career woman, and I was telling her about this ladder, and she said, "Oh, it's not really like a ladder, is it? It's more like a mountain." I was like, "Oh yeah."
So it
So
is.
getting input and inspiration from lots of people has also been really important, and has deepened relationships for me with my clients. I didn't mention that, but that's another enjoyable thing that's come out of this process is having reasons to talk to people and hearing what their challenges are as well.
So, well, let's talk about that a bit, because I always think that the relationships that come out of the book writing journey are so important, and people don't tend to talk about them or even think about them up front. So,
Yeah.
tell us a bit about that, because
Mm.
there's a few different periods here, aren't there? There's a period when you're researching and writing and thinking about your book, and then there's the full on writing and then into production, and then there's kind of after the book is out. I guess you
Mm.
can't speak with too much authority to the last stage yet, having just received your advanced copies. But just
Yeah.
tell us how that journey kind of unfolded in terms of your
Yeah.
connections with
A-
people.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd already done a lot of interviews for Forbes,
Mm.
over 70 articles. So I had a lot of interviews sort of in the bank, as it were, but I didn't really sort of just take those. I wanted to do new interviews. So I think I've done over 100 interviews for this book in particular. Um, and it was really lovely to be able to have conversations with clients, not in a sales
Yeah.
capacity, and also to get to speak to the really senior people, CEOs of major blue chip organizations who were interested in this. And I think it's really about being able to be that authority and have a point of view and be an expert in an area and just help me develop. And I love connections. I'm a bit, I always call myself queen of connections, or collaboration connection. I love it. And it was a real, and I suppose my background's been in research as well. So I do love research and building my business based on data and research, because it's really powerful. And then it's not about me. And that's in terms of confidence. That's where I get my confidence. It's not me. It's actually, and that was something we talked about, wasn't it? About the point of view and
That
how do I
curator view.
write, yeah, to
Mm.
curator view. And you said move from being a curator to a creator. And that was a big shift for me, actually. And I think I got there in the end with the book, being more of
And I
a creator.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of people do get stuck there, because, as you say, it's easy to hide behind it.
Mm,
It feels like a less scary thing to do, because you don't have to listen to me, you listen to these people who are really amazing.
yeah.
And I think that part of that journey of writing the book, particularly, and you demonstrated it beautifully, but I think it happens in perhaps in a less obvious way for other people too, is that they start to realize that what they're bringing to the conversation is really important. And I would say to anybody who's writing that book based on interviews and research and so on, don't hide behind them. You use those to weave into your argument, but actually it's your book, so
Yes.
own that
Yes,
conversation.
I think you're right, because you said to me at the beginning I was going to do sort of case studies of sort of interviews and that sort of thing. And actually, what I did was I took all of those interviews and I created things like the PACE framework, and then looked back at all the interviews and said, so who was talking about the passion,
Yeah.
who was talking about accountability, and then sort of, as you say, weaving that into the messages.
Yeah. So I,
Yeah.
I guess the question is, if you were going to do it again, what would you do differently?
Never, never. I'm joking. I was
No,
quite
but if you
surprised.
were.
I know. I was quite surprised actually writing down what I enjoyed, because I was thinking, gosh, I did enjoy it actually.
Yeah.
and I think, sorry, what was the question? If I were to write a book again,
What would you do differently?
what would I do differently? I'd probably look at the cover design a bit later on in the process. Um, what would I do differently? I think it was really good to get into the rhythm of writing, actually, and actually understanding. To begin with, I was sort of doing my day job, running the business, and then fitting the book in around it. And I think there was one point where I kind of
Yeah,
changed, and do you remember? And I kind
I
of
agree.
switched, and I was like, No, I'm now actually an author. I'm
This is my
writing this
job.
book. This is my job, and the other bits fit around it. And so my mindset was completely on the book. I wasn't trying to think about the business and everything else, because I think when you're writing, you need to have your space up there to do that cogitating and kind of mulling over things. And if you're thinking about all the day-to-day stuff, you just don't have space. So I think for me, that was a real moment. And I would basically say I'm writing the book for this period of time, and my day job comes second. So I think that would be the biggest learning. Really.
And would that be your tip, if I was to ask you about a tip for a first-time author?
No, actually, I think my tip would be to agree a publication date, because I know a lot of people sort of say, I'm going to write a book, and then they go off and try and sell it into publishers and everything else. And for me, I knew if I didn't have a publication date to work to, I would never get it done, because other things crowd it out, and it doesn't happen. So I'd firstly say get a publication date to work to if you can, and then work out what your strengths are, because I've kept thinking, oh, maybe I need a ghostwriter to help me write it. And actually, it wasn't that. I didn't need that. I needed a different team of people around me. So I've got Claire, who's been absolutely phenomenal. She's been by my side the whole way, from research, writing bits, editing, detail around checking the quotes, everything. She's been a superstar, and I literally could not have done it without her. And then your input as a mentor and coach as well during that process, and really finding out what did I really need to help me on that journey, so that I could be the author that I wanted to be.
That's a lovely way of phrasing it. And Joy, because I know you've listened to the podcast before, I always ask my guests to recommend a book. You're not allowed to recommend your book, sorry. Apart from Don't Fix Women, is there a book that you think everybody listening should read?
There is, and it's a really tricky one, because I think I was saying to you the other day, I've been just reading lots of women's books and gender equality books, and I didn't want to talk about a gender equality book. So it's actually another practical inspiration title called The Long Win by Kath Bishop, who I've actually met, again, thanks to you, because you put us in touch, and we met and got on very well. And I've read her book because I'm somebody who likes to win. I'm very competitive. I've always have been. And it's amazing how it's completely reframed my thinking about winning and the importance of the journey as well as the outcome. And I think in particular for me, it's helped me as a mother, because I'm so ambitious, and I'm, that's kind of the way I've been brought up. It was really interesting, the bit about school in the book, which talked about how the schooling system is geared towards this kind of winners and losers. And I've got my son is neurodiverse, he has ADHD, so I'm struggling at the moment a bit with how to help him in school. And I was like, gosh, this is just amazing. This is so interesting, about how I hadn't thought about it, how it's all about winning and losing. And it's not necessarily creating the right behaviors and things you need for a future career, because it's not about collaboration. It's not about necessarily about communication. It's just, I think the whole thing needs shaking up, actually. So I thought it was fab.
Yeah.
Really good book.
Well, I think it's fab too. And well, yes, of course I do, but it is. And that point about the schools thing is really interesting, actually. And just, on some sort of personal perspective, having one child who's neurotypical and one who is neurodiverse and has been through the special school system. The special school system is just fabulous, in terms of being child-centred rather than league table centred. And it was a real revelation. So it's not, the way we do things is not the only way to do it.
No.
Great recommendation. Thank you. And Joy, if people want to find out more about you, more about the work that you do, more about the book, where should they go?
So the company's called Encompass Equality, so you can find us on encompassequality.com. Do connect with me on LinkedIn. I love hearing from people and connections on LinkedIn, so that's a really good way to get in touch. And then the book website's called don'tfixwomen.com, so you can go on there and find out more. And then also I have the Confidence Conversation podcast, so if you want to listen anyone lacking in confidence, then hop on that and have a listen to that too.
That's the place to go. Brilliant. I could talk to you all day, Joy. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. And we've covered so much stuff. But congratulations again on the book.
Thank you. And I'm so excited.
I'll wave it one more time.
I've listened to your podcast, so many episodes of your podcast, and I thought, gosh, one day that might be me. And today it is. So.
I think you just need to wave the book one last time.
Okay, where is it? Here we go. Yay.
Yay. What a moment. Brilliant. All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Joy.
Thank you, Alison.